Hi there, and welcome to Real Talk in ELT, a podcast about the reality of teaching English. I'm your host, Kelly Pennington. Thank you for joining me today. All right. Welcome back to another episode of Real Talk in ELT. I'm here with James Taylor. Welcome, sir.
Hello. Lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Where are you, actually? In São Paulo?
I'm in Brasilia. I live in Brasilia. Been here.
Oh, gosh. Why did I think you were from São Paulo for some reason?
I don't know, because virtually everyone in ELT in Brazil is in Sao Paulo.
That's true. But I did go to Brasilia for the Brastisel conference years ago.
Ah, okay.
I stayed in the Asas. It was an experience up there. Dry.
That's where I live. Yeah. Oh, don't even. Yes. It hasn't rained here. Like I don't honestly remember the last time it rained.
I don't know how the plants behind you are alive unless they're artificial.
No, it's because of me. My nurturing instincts.
All right, let me give you a proper introduction, sir. So yes. James Taylor is an Elton award-winning materials writer, teacher trainer, and project manager for Active English. He's the communications director of Brastisel and the leader of the Brastisel's materials writing SIG. He's written course materials for a variety of publishers, produces podcasts, and co-founded the Raise Up Project, encouraging diversity in ELT materials. Welcome. Okay, so can we just talk about your podcast? What podcast are you producing, sir?
Currently, I'm producing 4 podcasts.
So ambitious. Okay, here we go.
Well, they're not all happening simultaneously, but they're all at various stages of. None of them are dead. Let's put it that way, right? So
they sometimes die, but it's fine.
Most of them do, I think.
The
statistics. If you manage to produce, I think, more than 10 episodes, you're in the top 5% of most productive podcasts ever. I think. Like it's
really.
Yeah, almost. Very few of them get past like a handful of episodes. Very few.
Okay. Interesting.
People start with good intentions, and then it's sort of, they realize it's some work to do. So congratulations to you and to me, for both of us.
Yay, us!
Because we're the cream of the crop. Well, so okay, I'll rattle through them quickly. So the first, my main one is the TEFL Commute podcast, which has been going now for about 7 years, I think. And that's one that I produce with Lindsay Clanfield, Sean Wilden, Kerry Jones, and Sandy Millen. And that's kind of light-hearted ELT podcast and each one is based around a different theme. And I'm the producer of that, so I don't appear on microphone that often. Some might say mastermind. I'll let other people be the judge of that.
I'm so ready for some British humor and snarky comments from you today. It's just I'm excited.
No, it's not snark. It's all genuine, very genuine. I'm the power behind the throne. No, no. So I do most of the production and the editing and that kind of stuff. So they do most of the on mic things. But we've just in our last season we had our 100th episode. So
congratulations! That's awesome. That's really
awesome. We'll be coming back very soon. We just started to plan the next season, so that's one. I'm a member of the IATEFL Teacher Development SIG, and we have a podcast which we do periodically, and that's called DevelopPod. So that I recommend to people. That's been going for quite a while as well. And then I produced 2 new podcasts with a friend of mine called Vicky Loris, who's based in Switzerland. And we know each other, have known each other for a long time through the ELT community. And she's now doing a PhD. So she's sort of moving more towards the academic realm, but she's doing 2 podcasts, which are both based around her interest in phonology, phonetics, and doing a PhD. So one is called the PHON Pod, PHON Pod, which is
nice.
Sort of more on the phonetic side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And she speaks to different academics doing research in that area. And then the second one is called Meet the PhDs, where she speaks to people doing PhDs in different disciplines. Both those podcasts are quite intimidating for me to listen to because I'm very out of my depth with both of them.
Yeah. But isn't it good to kind of be the fly on the wall on those podcasts? I feel like that's the beauty of podcasts. Well, we both love podcasts. We kind of chatted about that recently, but you kind of, it's a very less intimidating way of kind of picking somebody's brain and listening to things that you wouldn't necessarily have access to, because we don't really have radio talk shows anymore. TV and social media is just, well, we know the state of that. So podcasts are really kind of that entrance into information sharing.
Yeah, and I think the thing I love about them as well, it could seem like a disadvantage, but I actually think it's an advantage of podcasts, is they're harder to sort of chop up, and you can't sort of jump in halfway through. I mean, no one, like that thing on the radio. So if you're joining us, we're talking about this, blah, blah, you can't, no one does that with the podcast, right? You start the beginning. You may not get to the end, but you have to start the beginning. And so the fact that it actually requires more attention, I think, makes it a much more in-depth form of sort of media than other types of media that are around. I don't think it's the same as social media or other things, because it can't just be easily chopped up and turned into other forms. And
you know what? It's like the modern form of storytelling. And we love, as teachers, educators, we love storytelling. We think that, the context and engagement of people to go through the story. So it's this new modern form of storytelling, because we honestly, how often do you listen to stories? And even there's podcasts now that are like 2-3 hours, and I'll sit there and listen to them. I'll put it on my bedside table as I'm going to sleep and just listen to them for hours. It's longer than TV series. It's longer than movies. It's more entertaining usually.
Yeah. Although I do, when I speak to people who are starting a podcast, I always recommend that they don't do that because I think basically there are enough of those podcasts.
Yeah.
Right? And it's very hard to sort of get people most people have sort of found a podcast that they like that's long like that, and it's very difficult to make time for another one. And so I tend to say, look, if you've got something interesting to say in a short period of time, and then, maybe you can do that over a few episodes if you want, but it's very hard to get people to listen to like these massive ones anymore, I think.
Well, I usually listen to the crazy ones. I don't know about you. I listen to crazy podcasts about conspiracy theories and medical stuff and science, and I go off into the rabbit holes.
I listen to a lot of different things. I love it's because I have a lot of interests, and so there are podcasts for literally everything, right? So I listen to a lot of comedy podcasts and things related to football. And
do you have a team?
I'm from Brighton in the UK, so my team are Brighton and Hove Albion, which is good nowadays because we're in the Premier League and we're doing quite well. And for most of my life, no one had a clue who we were, but now we're quite successful.
So kind of made a name for yourselves now.
Some people might actually know who that team is nowadays, but which is weird for me. I'm not used to us being sort of reasonably successful. It's always just been decades of misery, so it's quite strange. But I listen to I listen to some science and skepticism podcasts, and there's so many different areas of just sort of interesting people talking about interesting things, right? So I'm a bit addicted. It is I have to sort of sometimes I have to say I'm sitting here at my desk going, okay, you're gonna have to work now, James. Like disconnect the headphones. Come on.
I gotta turn it off. I
just want to listen to this bit, But.
Well, and the problem is that friends and colleagues know that this is kind of your thing. Like I have classified myself, I don't know if this is even a thing, as an information gatherer. That is just Kelly in a nutshell. I'm an information gatherer. I like perspectives and lots of information. And so people will just send me things. And I'm like, oh, it's so bad because my WhatsApp and my phone will just start ringing. I get emails and everything. And it's just, people sending me here and there, usually podcasts. And, I saw this. I thought of you. I'm like, oh, God. And then down the rabbit hole I go.
The last thing I want to hear is when someone says, oh, I heard this podcast. It's really good. I think you'll like it. I'm like, please don't tell me that. I'm overwhelmed. I'm a huge fan of the singer Björk, right? And so she just announced that she's doing a new podcast where she talks about all her albums. And I was like, oh no, I'm gonna have to listen to it. I can't believe it. How could she do that to me? So how am I going to fit this in?
You feel offended. You're like, oh God, really?
And I listened to the first 3 and they're fantastic. I'm like, oh, how could you do that to me, Bjork?
Because if they were bad, then you'd be like, I'm not missing much, right? But
yeah. But add it to the pile,
the list of things to do. So you did say that you have to occasionally turn off this addiction to podcasts because you actually need to write things. And yes. We were chatting back and forth, which is always interesting. And I told you that one of my curiosities now, and I wanted to get your perspective as a materials writer, someone who just, this is what you do, freelance materials writing. Yeah. One, I want to know a little bit about how you got into that. So let's start there before I ask you the questions. So how did this all develop, moving into materials writing?
Slowly, and there was no moment, like it was sort of gradual process over time. So I think I was becoming a materials writer before I realized that that's what I wanted to do. Because I've had a blog for years. I think maybe nearly 11 years, maybe. And
I love the people that are like, I have a blog, because nobody does it anymore. But this blogs is where it all started.
Yeah, it did.
And
I would say that I think the fact that they're not as popular anymore is actually a real shame, because a bit like with podcasts. It's a different format, and so to the idea that you can move from a blog to Instagram, it's not, it doesn't work, right? And apart from anything else, by creating a website, then you're creating a backlog of material which will stay there. And social media is nowhere near as searchable, and no one goes back really and looks at, like, if you're looking for, I don't know, I'm interested in teaching an activity on this particular subject. What are you going to do? You're going to go to a search engine and search for it, right? You're not going to go to Instagram and search for, lesson plans on whatever, right? And so I think that it's a real shame, actually, because it lends itself to like longer form sharing, which social media is not very good at, especially not the social media that people are particularly interested in at the moment, right? But anyway, so I don't blog a lot anymore. It's very occasional, but that's only because of time, really, not because I sort of don't enjoy it anymore. But one thing I always did on my blog was I would create lesson materials. I would create them anyway for my lessons, and then I would say, okay, I can stick this on my blog and people can use it. And so when I think about how long it took me to start doing that, it was actually really quick. It was only like a few years. I think, maybe 3 years after I started teaching that I started making my materials. Almost immediately after doing the CELTA, probably I was. And it just felt like a natural sort of progression to do. And everyone was blogging at that time that I knew. So it would go on the blog and it would make sense to do that. So I did that for a long time. And then another thing I noticed about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe slightly more, was that like all my presentations that I wanted to do at conferences were about materials. That was the thing I found really interesting, and it kind of took me a little while. Yeah, it took me a little while to notice. I was like, every time I was thinking of an idea for a presentation, it was like, it's about materials, and I'm really a bit obsessed with lesson materials. But I think like everyone should be, because they're really important.
Well, yeah, they are actually. Yeah, they are important. But here's the thing: I'm going to challenge you a little bit because I feel like we're friendly enough that I can.
Yeah.
What's most important in a lesson, though? The teacher or the materials?
Oh, I wouldn't even. It should be, all being well, it should be the teacher, definitely, right?
Okay.
Definitely. I know that when I create my materials, I'm not creating them as a way of like saying, this is the way a lesson must be, but it's more of for me, materials. The importance of materials is just based on pragmatism, right? it's just a reality of the situation. Love it or not, the fact is that there are a lot of English lessons happening today, and a lot of them are using materials. And the idea that they're not going to use those materials anymore, right? If you think that's good, great. But for that to be a reality would be an enormous shift in a massive multinational, multi-million-dollar industry, right?
Yeah.
So
I ask you this. Yeah,
I'm interested in the reality, right? So the theory is very interesting as well, but I know I've flirted with that in the past, but as a teacher, but but when I make my materials, I'm trying to make materials for teachers who are often underpaid, overworked, don't have time to be creating enough materials for them to teach the number of lessons they require to teach in a week. And what I would hope is that they're skilled enough to be able to use those materials and know that they're carefully put together in a certain sequence for a reason. But obviously, I don't know their students and their context. So you want that sort of happy marriage between those two things going on at the same time.
Yeah, this is kind of why I wanted to talk to you, because recently, in a teacher group that in WhatsApp, I wasn't really paying attention. I have to be brutally honest. I wasn't paying attention so much, but one of the participants of the group said, "Can you guys share any sites that have free materials?" And then there was, like 12 sites, and everybody was sharing sites that have free lesson plans. And listen, I use them too. I get the practicality of them. I love materials. I'm a collector of materials. I'm an information gatherer. I love materials. But so then the teacher responded in the group, "Oh, I've already used all of the free materials from all of these sites."
Wow.
And so that's what shocked me, James. That's what I sat there. I was like, "Ooh, how?" Because so then I think to myself, okay, so materials are super important. I'm not disagreeing with you there. However, do you think that nowadays teachers are actually exploiting the materials that are being made to the full potential?
Wow, that's a big question. That's hard to say. I mean, and part of the problem, of course, is when we say materials, what do we mean by materials? I mean,
so we've got a lot to unpack there.
There's a big difference between sort of being in a school and then they say to you, "Here's your class, and these are the books you're going to use with this class for this semester. Your job is to get from this page to this page, and then you have to fill in a report so we know that you're on track," and all of that stuff, right? That's one thing. And then you've got another teacher, like the person you're describing there, who's looking for materials for them to use, and they're going around different websites and finding stuff and taking those things, and that's a different thing, because some of those materials may be great, but some of them may be terrible, because it's on the internet. This is true of everything on the internet, right?
Absolutely. So we don't know the quality that they're using. And I mean, this is, I just wonder from like the materials writer perspective, because everybody uses the materials. Everybody can find free materials online. Everybody can find free books. Unfortunately, we can find, lots of free stuff online, paid things. From your perspective, do you ever think about that? I mean, obviously you would, because you have to think of the end user, which is the teacher. Then like, how does that go for you?
You mean in terms of what do you mean? What do I have in mind?
Like, what do you have in mind when you think, okay, so I have to make this because you said your target audience are the people that you really want to create materials for, the people that are overworked, underpaid, and they just need something that's quality. But do you ever consider the people, how they're using it in class? And
you
obviously,
have to,
right?
You have to a point, right? To a point,
right?
Because obviously there are teachers' notes as well, right? And those teachers' notes are very carefully put together, and sometimes they're written, sometimes I write them, sometimes I don't, depending on the project. But I do feel like, I wasn't always great at this myself as a teacher, but I do feel like the teachers' notes, especially for some teachers, need them more than others, but they are very deliberately put together as well, right? So they're really they can be very, very important for the materials. depending on the subject, and if it's an area where the teacher doesn't know a lot about that area. So that's one aspect. The thing, so when I create materials, there's a target audience in mind, right? Now, obviously, the main target audience are not teachers, it's the students, right? That's who I'm really creating the materials for, is the students. You're not, the teacher's got to, and the teacher's attitude should be that as well, right? And so I think that's the first thing, is that you're saying, okay, we've got the obvious stuff, age, level, the educational environment that they're in.
Characteristics, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that you can't go much more than that, because you don't know though anything right. Much more than like is it a book for young learners, teens, or adults, right? What level are they? What type of institution are the publishers aiming, planning to sell this to, right? There's not much beyond that you can know. So you keep that in, so you keep the students in mind, and then I guess I use my own teaching context, my own teaching experience a lot. I think about classes that I've taught. I quite often have that in mind when I'm thinking about a lesson. I'll think about a group that I used to teach that was of a similar profile, and think, would this have worked for them? What would they have thought of this? How would it go? That's one sort of model I have in mind. But there's a limit to how much I can do, right? In terms of making it sort of tailor-made. Because obviously that's
there it is.
That's the, it wasn't the, I was halfway through that when I realized. But it's,
I loved it though.
but there's how much can you do with those things? You've got to, at some point you've got to trust the teacher to be able to execute what you had in mind, and you've got to be very happy with the fact that that's the process, that's how it works. You can't worry too much about that, because otherwise you'd start knocking on doors of classrooms going, how are you using my book?
Exactly. So, yeah, there has to be, and I wonder that only because, like, sometimes I make my own materials for my own students, and sometimes I make materials and have this thought process, and then I think to myself, gosh, I don't know if I would be able to let that baby go, like just cut the cord and let it go, and see, I feel like, because you just put so much time and effort into these things, like writing materials is so extensive. You need so much skill to be able to do that. And I think people overlook that sometimes. So, and just letting it go and hoping for the best, I feel like I would have a very difficult time doing that.
Well, one of the first things you have to learn even before that stage, one of the first things you have to learn when you're writing for a publisher is that you have to be comfortable with the fact that what goes in the book may not be exactly what you want, right? Because most of the time they are hiring you to do a project that they have, right? It's not my project. They come to me and say, we have this project and we need a writer. Are you interested, right? And so that will mean that they'll come to me and say, we're looking at so it's going to be this sort of age group, this type of schools. It may be like a project I'm working on right now, which is just to use in one specific company, right? These materials are not going to be published for anyone to use. I'm writing them for one school to use them, right? And so they have these parameters in mind. They come to me, and then I have to write materials. And then, but the process is that I write them, and then I send them to the editor. Now, the editor has the seniority over me in terms of making the final decision about what goes in and what doesn't, right? So when you're writing in this kind of situation, you have to get comfortable very, very quickly with the fact that they will change things, right? And you can't be precious.
And I think this is, I was talking to Luz Tavu one time, and talking to you, I think this is like the big misconception. People are a little disillusioned of the fact that, like, oh, I'm going to be a materials writer, I'm going to have these huge projects and write books. It's like, no. That doesn't happen. Well, you can publish your own if you want to be a self-published writer, but if you're going to
it can happen. I mean, but it isn't the only thing that happens, right? I'm lucky in that the first real project that I had as a materials writer was exactly like this. I mean, like my name is on the cover of the book. We wrote 4 books together. We were right there at the beginning of the process, creating the character of the series and everything. So, I mean, but I don't know, maybe that will never happen again. I don't know. But
I mean, well, how often has that happened since? I mean, you did the 4 books.
It hasn't.
So I would assume that this is kind of a rarity in the materials writing.
Yeah, but that's not to say that it doesn't happen. But I think I think I was very lucky, right place, right time, and all that kind of stuff. But it's more to do with the fact that there's a lot of different types of work out there. Being a materials writer is not, which I would have thought, even till fairly recently, the idea that because I had this beginning as a writer where it was like sitting down and sitting here and writing the books, but then actually no, there's a lot of different types of materials that need to be written for different types of companies, and so it's not it's not a bad thing that this isn't always as it is, because like you have to get comfortable with these some ideas, right? Things like, okay, you're not this authorial vision, right? Which I think that we have because I think people have this misconception about other types of writers as well. Like I think, fiction writers, you think this is someone who's got their vision and they sit down and write a novel and it's their great work and all of that kind of stuff. But they have editors too. Editors who will say, no, you need to get rid of that. That doesn't make any sense. That's boring.
Change the ending.
Change this,
Take that chapter out. Yeah.
And if the editor really doesn't like what they've done, then the book won't be published. And so you have to get comfortable with the fact that unless you're doing some kind of self-published thing, you're going to be hired to write on someone's project, and you've got to write what they want. And if you've got some other ideas and you want to take it in a different way, well, if they don't agree with you, they'll just hire someone else to do it. Right? There's plenty of people who'll do it.
Yeah, so, I feel like writers have way less of an ego than what people actually think, because you just are writing and there's editors and you're contributing, and it's not, this is my book. No, it's a contribution to project.
I mean, if you talk, I mean, I was the first big project that I did was our languages for FTD. That's the one I was talking about, where and it's got my name and Bruno, my co-author's name, on the front, right? Which is increasingly rare as well, that you actually have authors' names on the front of books. But when you open the page and you look inside there's a whole big list of people's names that contributed, right? And so after Bruno and I finished writing those books, I mean, it was the best part of the year before they were books, So stuff was happening in that time which had absolutely nothing to do with us. And that book is actually a really good lesson in that, because one of the most striking thing about those books is that they are gorgeous. They are like just so well designed. And I can say that because it had almost nothing to do with me at all. Right?
Yeah.
I didn't contribute to I made suggestions for things that if it was part of the lesson, then
right.
Okay, I need
content
a related
of
this, right? But apart from that, the design style and the fact that it's got sort of QR codes with videos and the whole it's got animated covers that you can hold your phone up to, and like augmented reality thing. Absolutely nothing to do with me at all. And of course, anytime I shown the books to people, especially people like in my family who have nothing to do with this world at all, they spent ages just talking, wow, look at it, it looks amazing, look at the video, look, you get on your phone and they're like looking at it, and at some point I'm like, yeah, the lessons I wrote are quite good as well.
That they're more impressed with the things you didn't do.
I love to do it. So that's good though. It's healthy, like, because you can it's always people's first reaction. Oh, they look amazing. Go, yeah, pedagogy is quite good. But yeah, okay. Yeah. So you have to. I think if you don't feel comfortable with that kind of thing, then it's going to be harder than it needs to. I don't want to give the wrong impression that we're like some sort of, we have no like say at all. Obviously, when they hire someone, they're looking to hire someone who they think can bring something to the project of value. And
no, absolutely. The writers are extremely qualified to do this. Yeah.
So, but again, it would depend on the project. One project I did as well, which I was brought in quite last minute, and pretty much everything was laid out already, including like what the lessons were more or less about, the language objectives, all that kind of stuff was already pretty much done. So they would look, we need someone to write these lessons, you know. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I can do that, you know. And so that's what I did, you know. There's a lot of possibilities, you know, they're actually becoming more and more possibilities, more and more different places to do. Sometimes I do like sort of proofreading almost kind of work. It's not my favorite work to do, to be honest, but you know, if I need a job and it comes up, then I'll do it. So you can do you know, just going through manuscripts that people have already written and checking. My colleague Bruno, who I worked with, Bruno and Judge, who worked with on our languages, and that I will be working with again at some point. He specializes in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and so publishers send him materials that they're planning to publish for him to check it to make sure that they haven't overlooked anything in the materials, that, you know, where he can say, well, have you noticed that, you know, all of the women in this book are sort of, you know, looking at all the pictures of women in this book are looking at men, on, you know, things like this, that kind of stuff. So they hire him to look at different aspects of DEI. I mean, that's a job that didn't exist even probably 3 or 4 years ago. So there's a lot of different elements of being a materials writer. It isn't just simply just sitting down and writing lessons that are going to be published in the book. And there's the whole world of self-publishing as well, of course.
Talking about that, sorry, my dog barked, scared me. She barks, I get jumpy. Good thing I can mute, right? Talking about kind of Bruno's job and how DEI is now this thing that was not considered necessarily a few years ago. How do you see, and this was my question that I originally wanted to ask you about, how do you see the future or future predictions of materials? Because we see that a lot of the big publishing houses are putting things in digital formats and on platforms, and we have like digibooks and things like that. Do you think, does that change the process for writers? Do you see any trends or tendencies that we're probably headed towards? So
in terms of, you're talking about in terms of like publishing platforms and formats. And
yeah, well, I'll give you for example. So we were at Rusticels together in São Paulo, and I was walking around to the publishers and asking them about any upcoming projects or new releases or series for business English. And all of them, every single one said, we have nothing coming out that they've chosen.
Yeah.
And so I know that business English is a very specific, and that's kind of a separate thing. So, and I wonder what the trend is and what's happening.
But I think business English is a bit different, right? Because I think
it is.
When you look at, because the kind of materials that I find most interesting to write are if you look at my CV, what I've done so far, and then what I'm about to tell you, they're not really the same, right? Because it depends on the opportunity.
Okay.
Right? I'm most interested in writing materials for adults, which includes business English, and I quite like exam preparation as well, right? But I haven't done any work for an international publisher. All my work's been for Brazilian publishers and schools. And so and then the market there, right, that's focused on schools, right, as in kids, teens, you know, the young learners. You know, if you're the owner of one of those types of schools and you have exam prep classes, you're just probably going to buy the Cambridge exam prep book for
right.
This,
yeah,
right?
I mean, practicality,
you know,
cost, obviously.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And if you're a publisher in Brazil, you're not probably going to think it's worth the effort. Because you're not going to sell enough copies.
Yeah, you're not going to compete with Cambridge and Oxford and all that. No,
and it's the same with business English, right? I don't think I've ever seen a business English book which is not like an international one. I'm sure they exist somewhere, in some markets, but I've definitely never seen a Brazilian published like business English book. So I think that there are some areas which are a bit, even though it's not specialized, it's actually quite a big market. But if you compare the adult market to the young learners and teens market, I think it's microscopic in size. So that's why you don't tend to see Brazilian publishers publish books for adults at all. So
they
that's why
compete,
and it's just not. I think they think it's not worth their while. Cost. It's not. They're not going to sell enough copies. That's why there's never been a course book for one-to-one teaching. Right? There's a lot of people do one-to-one teaching. So many people do one-to-one teaching, but no one's ever published like a mainstream ELT course book for that.
Right.
Because you can only sell, like, if I'm a teacher and I have like 10 groups, if I have one-to-one, I've got 10 students. If I've got groups of 15, I've got 150 students. Right? So you're never going to, I guess they think they're never going to sell enough copies, to make it worth it. But anyway,
no, it does make sense. Like I see the logic. I mean, these are companies; they have to make a profit. I mean, we're living in the real world. That they have to stay viable to be able to maintain the business.
But I didn't answer your question. Your actual question.
That's okay. Yeah. Well, we diverge. We come back. It's fine.
But which was about. I think that it's very interesting. I kind of have mixed feelings about it, because one thing that tends to happen with anything that's sort of changing is that people sort of rush to assume that things will happen faster than they actually do. And I think if you actually look back at predictions that were made in the past about supposed advances, then very rarely do these predictions actually come true, or usually takes a lot longer than people think, right? So we have a tendency, people have just tend to say, well, in 5 years, everyone will be doing this. You go, well, I don't know. It usually takes a lot longer. So I'm always very wary when I sort of predict the future, because you think these things always take longer than you think. But then I do think that these platforms are changing, because there are more, as a materials writer, I just see it as more opportunities really than as a threat or anything. I mean, a lot of these platforms, the content isn't actually that different from what would be in a book anyway, right now. I mean, essentially, instead of saying, tick the boxes on the page, it's like clicking the drop-down menu or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not like there's a new way of studying and learning or anything like that is happening. It's very much the same methodology, same types of activities, and so on. The fact that a lot of classes are online means that you don't really, you can still, it's not that difficult to say, okay, discuss this with your partner, or put you in a group of 4, go and work on this together, like you would in a face-to-face classroom. It's not that difficult to do that now anymore. So that means that we won't change things a lot in that respect. And I do think that there'll be more variety of platforms available. However, I still think there will be many, many people who are using books for a long time, actual physical paper books for a long time, because people like them.
Yeah, I do. I'm an old school kind of girl. I like the book. However, I was thinking to myself, I do. I like having a physical. I like being able to write in it. So I guess I'm old at this point. But the thing that I was thinking about, and the reason it kind of popped into my head, was the books go outdated so quickly. And if these publishers are doing like platforms where materials are available there, they can update them.
True, but
do you know what I'm saying? Like a little bit easier, but you might have to pay. So people, why would I invest?
Yeah,
do you see what I'm saying?
But it's not easy. People think you can just sort of quite easily update the material, but it's not that easy to update. To do, because people have to. You've still got to hire someone to go through to rewrite the materials, to get it updated and all that. That is easier than it is doing a new print run of books.
That's what I meant. Not that it's easier for the people to update it, but it's easier for them to distribute the new materials. The
distribution, yes. Although I do think we sort of underestimate digital costs. I'm not an expert in this area, but creating a platform, hosting that platform, having a platform that thousands of people can use. It needs maintenance, it needs tech support. It's not a cheap option to do that right now. Is it cheaper than printing actual books? Possibly, I don't know. I would guess, but it's still like not cheap to do.
Yeah, I just wonder about these trends and like what if you see anything different being in the position that you are, because I'm a user of materials. I'm not, in direct contact like you are. So I wonder if there's trying to push people in one way or another, or if things are changing because of current trend.
I think so I think there are more options, but I think if you're a publisher who wants to sell thousands and thousands of copies of a book, then a book is still by far and away the most attractive way of doing that. Because I think from the pandemic period, we've seen that we have these opportunities to do things like we're doing now, but there are lots of people, right, who like would be happily just desperately trying to get back to face-to-face type things as quickly as possible, right? And that will apply to students as well, right? They'll be like, yeah, I can do it online, but I'd much rather be there in the room with the teacher and people. I mean, that's a very human thing. And so until, I don't know, maybe the metaverse will develop to such a state
no, thank you. The metaverse is just it's too much for me.
Maybe that will happen eventually, where it doesn't feel any different to being in the room with people. I do think that's probable, but I do think it would. I don't think I'll be working anymore by the time that's feasible. But then even then,
not. I don't want to be in that.
But I tell you what will happen is people will put on their whatever equivalent like headset is, probably just like a pair of glasses or something, and they'll go into that situation, and then they'll be like sitting there in a classroom in a U shape with a teacher standing in front of them saying, "Okay, now open your books to page 28."
How we come full circle.
Because it's comfortable, it's like so people can be very conservative, like with these things. They crave comfort and familiarity, and
well, it is human nature to do that.
To be fair, it's pretty good, right? It works pretty well. I mean, it's the best idea we've had so far.
I do have to say, like, as an addition to what you just said, that a lot of people criticize printed materials, that they're not good. I personally love to use authentic materials, but people misrepresent that idea when I say I love authentic materials. I use printed materials as well, because I know the time and effort, and they're practical, that people know what they're doing. It's something that I don't have to think about, and it's good materials. So there's a lot of criticism of printed materials nowadays, and I think it's a little harsh and a little unjustified.
That's I mean, like my as I sort of said earlier, like on a pretty practical level, I mean, it just doesn't seem very realistic to me if you're talking about the state of like global English language education to say well, the teachers shouldn't be using materials. I go, okay, but it's more than just theory. This has to be a huge, like, seismic shift. But then I think with authentic materials, I have a talk that I do every now and again, which is called Overrated and Underrated in the ELT. And it's like a just sort of list of things that I think are overrated and things I think are underrated, and I just talk about why each one.
Wait. James, do you know Gary V? There's an American guy.
Yes, I'm aware of him. Yeah.
Okay. He has a whole social media thing. I mean, he's got this whole thing. He started in wines, and now he's, I don't know, NFTs. He's all over the place. Anyways, he has this, I've seen it on his social media, overrated, underrated. People submit things, and he talks about it, and he posts it on social media. So you could do your next podcast could be overrated, underrated.
Don't ask me. If I said it's bad to give me another podcast to listen to, don't give me another podcast to do. That's even worse.
I want you to make another one, James.
No, it's not happening. So
Go ahead, sorry.
in that talk, I said that authentic materials are both underrated and overrated. I put them as both, right? Or even actually the idea of authenticity is overrated and underrated, because I feel that there is a motivation factor to using authentic materials with learners. They're like, oh, I can, this is the real thing. That's great. And for some reason it seems to be good marketing, which I don't entirely understand, but like, this book is full of authentic materials. People seem to like that. Okay. But then on the other hand, I would say, okay, that's fine. But if I can create a text which is exactly what the students need in terms of linguistic input, and it's interesting, and and things as well, then what advantage does having an authentic text, which is not going to be exactly tailored for what the students need, unless you're very lucky in finding that text, then what difference does it make? If the students read it, they find it interesting, and it helps them improve their target language, then so what? About like that, isn't that what we're there for, right? So and I think the thing to remember as well is, with lower levels, which is the majority of our students, let's not forget, right? Authentic materials are hard to find for A1 and A2 that are worth using. I know, I've been there. It's hard. It's very hard to find authentic materials for A1, because you say, oh, this is perfect, and then they'll drop in a present perfect continuous or something, and then you're like, oh, right.
Well, yeah, somebody
or some vocabulary that they won't understand, and then you're like, okay, but then that creates a whole distraction, right? From the objective. Sorry, go on.
No. Somebody actually had requested, because sometimes I make some things like freebies and throw them out on social media whenever I can, and somebody had requested to give advice or a lesson plan of using a podcast with lower level learners. And I'm still, so I was like, I'll do it. No problem. I'll do it. But I'm struggling, because I keep thinking to myself, what can I do that is actually not just saying like, oh, well, we use the podcast. Yay. No, like I want them to, do you see what I'm saying? Like, you have to actually create something that's worthwhile. You can't just take it and say, well, we use the podcast, so good to go.
No, so when you're creating materials, right, you think, where am I starting from with these materials, right? It's like, what's the objective? The objective shouldn't be, I want them to listen to a podcast, right? The objective should be probably something to do with language, right? Because, that's what we're there for, primarily. And so, if you can then find a podcast which meets those needs, your aims, great, right? But if a podcast is not the best way to do that, then you've got to find something else. So it's a bit putting the cart before the horse, right? And then you've got to, this is a classic thing that teachers do when they're creating materials, is here's this cool new thing, right? Whether it's an app, it used to be an app a lot. This used to happen when the tech buzz was really hot in like the around 2012, 13, this period. And like, oh, here's this really cool app you could use with the students, and you go, okay, fine, yes, you can do that. But if you start with the app, not start with the students or the language objectives, then it's not saying it can't work, but it's probably not the best approach in general to take.
Oh, I 100% agree. I did recently, I did a sat down with Sue Cons. I don't know if you know Sue Cons from Sala dos Profs, and we talked about that because we were talking about gamification. And she said it, I mean, like 20 times in the podcast. We're like, start with your objective. What's your lesson aim? Don't include a game or try to gamify something without knowing what are you trying to do with the students. Because if you don't know what you're doing, then you can't, it's the same thing with materials. You can't just introduce random things because, oh, it's cool. You need to use it with a purpose.
So. Exactly. So to go back to that question of like, if someone asked me about that, then I think my temptation would be to actually probably choose a podcast which is for language learners, which is probably.
And there's a lot. There's quite a few now. People are making them. So. Why not?
Yeah, that's probably not what this person had in mind when they asked the question, but it's a classic thing. Like, I've taught a lot of adults and high level of adults, and but then you'd get people who are even like C1 or something saying, I want to use this article from The Economist in my next class. And then once that, and then when you start to, I mean, I did it sometimes where I was like, well, I think this might be a bit tricky, but no, I really want to do it. Oh, okay, fine, all right, we'll do it. And then once you start to dig into it, it's so much work in order to, like it's very dense. It's a lot of work, even for like C2 learners. There's a lot of idiomatic language in there, and metaphor, tons of metaphor. And so once they, when I found it was actually kind of demotivating. It can be demotivating in a way, because these are students who feel themselves as quite advanced, and then they read something like this, which is where they want to be, and then they're like, oh wow, this is really hard. And things they thought they understood, they didn't really understand. So in a way, if you're trying to go too fast, too far too quickly, then it can be more damaging than good, right? So, and if you're talking about lower level learners, then you've got to take your time, tread carefully, build them up appropriately.
But you also need to have some skill to do that, and you need to have hopefully we're talking to teachers that are working on their development and working on creating a good professional environment, etc., and that can use or make these informed decisions on when we can implement certain things and when the students are ready for this, so that they don't get demotivated in class, so that they don't have issues or that type of thing. So it's really, the teacher's responsibility to be the professional that knows how to apply these things in a very informed way.
Yeah, and they have to be realistic about what they're able to achieve, right? What they're and so this goes back to the when you think about authentic materials, right? It's super important that if you're choosing authentic materials, that you're able to choose the right kind of materials for your learners. That obviously that includes their level, right? So that's a skill, right? Looking at text, knowing what level it's appropriate for, knowing where the potential issues are, spotting potential areas for working in that could be useful. But then also, it's things like engagement as well, right? Do they? I had one private student of mine for a long time, and he would always bring up how he had this teacher once who brought a lesson about fishing to the class, and he was like, fishing? Who brings a lesson about fishing? Like, he could never believe that he was like, it was this example for him of like a terrible lesson.
It was like offensive and traumatic that someone talked about fishing with him.
Well, it was like the lesson was about fishing, but the thing is, I actually thought, well, it doesn't sound that bad, but obviously it depends on the person, right? But if you're teaching one-to-one and you've got if you say I'm going to do a lesson about fishing, then you should be pretty confident that the person you're talking to has any kind of interest in the subject at all. If you've got 15 students, then it's a bit different, because hopefully you will find this is a topic of mine that I love talking about, actually, which is the idea of student engagement and things like this when you're creating materials, because people get a bit obsessed about that, especially with teens. They've got to find it really interesting, and they've got to be really motivated, and you've got to use the things that they find interesting and everything. And I was feeling a bit like, well, do we? This probably won't get me any work saying this, but
no, but it is. See, the thing is, I think there has to strike a balance. Like, we need to talk about things that are important to them, that are going on in their real world, but we also have to, as educators, we have a responsibility to educate people about the reality of the world. And one part of that is, if they're learning another language, hopefully they're going to be using that to communicate with people outside their current environment, but also bringing it back to reality as well. you're teaching them a language. So not everything is fun and not everything is wonderful.
Precisely.
Sometimes they just have to do an exercise, and it needs to be digestible and scaffolded for them. And you know, and sometimes it is what it is. It's the yin and the yang.
So as a writer, I'm always trying to make materials which I think are really interesting, but I'm perfectly happy with the idea that not all of the students are going to find all of the lessons that I write interesting every single time, right? It's impossible. I mean, the more you think about it, the more ridiculous that is as an objective, right? It just can't happen. So, so then for me, the aim is to try and create, I'm going to create materials that are unique, different. I'm trying to do something different than what other people are doing, that involve, you know, like nowadays, publishers want things like they want diversity, but they also want English as a lingua franca. They want, you know, social and emotional learning and sort of soft skills and things like that, which I'm happy to do because I think they're interesting. I think they make the materials better. And so you're trying to achieve those things, but at the same time, if you've got 15-year-olds in a classroom, they're not all going to be interested in all the same things in every lesson. This is going to be, and you know, like I think teachers should feel comfortable, you know, if they feel that, go, no, okay, but this one's not for you, but hopefully the next one will be, right? But you know, you've got to be here, so let's make the most of it.
Well, yeah, I think, let me ask you about this because we'll go off on a tangent for a little bit. But engagement. So I think that people are confusing engagement with entertainment nowadays in the language classroom.
I don't think that's just nowadays. I think it's been like that for quite a while. Ever since I became involved in these things.
Okay, so I hedged.
Yeah, well, and I think one of the things that I've always heard people talking about a lot is I'm looking for some fun activities for this, right?
That's what I mean. It always has to be fun and exciting. And then for some reason, we threw engagement in there. And some of the most engaging lessons I've ever had or taught is that completely silent classroom. That's when I know my students are actually engaged with the material because they're so quiet and focused and they just want to do the activity.
This is another one of my
engagement.
favorite subjects. I'm very interested in silence, and I mean this actually connects to one of the presentations I did at Brest TESOL International Conference with Thais, where we spoke about introverted learners, right? And so
this is the one I had to miss because I was doing mine at the same time. Okay, please talk about this now.
Well, what I found really interesting is, and it's very much connected to sort of the idea of, you know, communicative language teaching, which we probably most of us are going to agree is a good thing, and that it's better than what we did before, and we've been doing it for quite a long time now. You know, things haven't changed that much in the last like sort of 2 or 3 decades, really, not that much. Some of the things I just mentioned in terms of types of activities that we do and areas that we look at, things, those change, but the sort of fundamentals of how a lesson works haven't changed that much. So we seem pretty settled on this at the moment as a good way of doing things. But then the part of my, and another part of my hypothesis is the fact that English language teaching seems to attract quite an extroverted type of person as a teacher, right? It's not I can't back this up with any research, right? But it's just it's my gut instinct from having met a lot of teachers that it seems to be a profession which is quite attractive to you know, there's quite a lot of teachers who like to see the front of the classroom as a bit of a stage.
I would have to say that there's a little bit of ego with teaching. Yeah, you have to have a little bit of an ego.
Yeah, but I think with language teaching in particular, because it lends itself to that, right? It encourages, like the methodology that we use, it encourages, you know, we like to do different types of activities like role plays. There's a lot of sort of asking the students to get up and perform, and it's very performative what we do, right? And I want to reiterate, I'm not saying it's a bad thing necessarily.
No, it's just a tendency.
However, what it can do is that you can get this situation where you see quiet students and silence as issues, right? They're so quiet. How many teachers have you heard say that? This group is so quiet, right? And I've said that, right, with a group where you're like, I can't get them to say anything. But then maybe that's the wrong question to be asking ourselves. It can be a sign of a lack of engagement, and that can be an issue. But it can also be a sign that perhaps a student is quite happy being like that. It's just their style. They're not going to get up and perform for you, right? And that's me. I'm that kind of person. I'm quite, I mean, in a classroom, I could be, as a student, I can be fairly talkative. But, you know, if the teacher's like, okay, I want everyone to sing along now with the song we've been listening to, it's not going to happen.
I'm not going to do it either.
Yeah.
You know, the thing is, I'm actually quite extroverted when I don't know what I am. I don't know how to classify myself when it comes to one-to-one. This is why my podcast and you know, when we met each other, because I can do the one-to-one and be very talkative and interactive.
Yeah.
But as soon as I get in front of a crowd or in big groups, I'm very, very uncomfortable. So in a classroom setting, I am the quiet person in the back of the class that doesn't really say anything and that doesn't chime in as much typically.
Yeah.
Unless I really am confident in what I'm talking about.
Well, when we look at what it means to be an introvert and extrovert, what was really interesting about the workshop that I did with Thais was that when we did that workshop, people said to us afterwards, I came to this workshop because I wanted to learn about how I could get my students to be more outgoing, right? And they actually realized that we were saying that's the wrong approach, right? It's not about that. Stop trying to change who people are, right? It's about you adjusting your teaching style and some of your activities so that you can then sort of meet the way that is best for them to learn, because that's the whole point of us being there, right? It's for them to learn. And it was really interesting to see that as a presenter, because, you know, as anyone who teaches knows, you get very good at reading people's faces. Because obviously all the time hopefully not all the time, but sometimes you see students and you just look at them and go, you have no idea what you're supposed to do now, right? They don't have to say anything, but you can just see in their eyes, like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. So you get very good at reading people's reactions. And that's very useful when you start presenting, because you can tell whether presentations are going well or not, but without people saying anything to you. But during this workshop, I could see that there was a lot of people's faces, like, sort of going, oh, okay, this is not what I thought it was going to be. You know, this is like having to adjust their expectations. And so I think that's something that I find.
I think it's sometimes a
quite
good
a big
thing.
shift for people. It's quite a big
Yeah,
shift.
but people sometimes go in with these expectations because they feel as if they know what they do. You know, they have this vision of this is how it's supposed to be, and when you see that look on their face, like, okay,
Yeah,
so
the tilt of the head when you
okay. But I think that's a really good thing, actually, because usually it's coming in as another perspective that they had not considered before.
Exactly.
And that's what's really important. Maybe you and Thais can come back and talk about all that stuff. Please come back.
Well, okay. Well, I'll save it then for another one.
Well, I mean, that was just like the longest teaser ever. Yeah, come back for the but I would love to dig into that and just, you know, talk about it, because I think it's an interesting
topic.
It is. And we assume that we're teaching to one type of person, but, you know, I did have a very, very quiet young girl, 17, 18 years old. And she was actually in with the adult class because she had quite a high level and she was extremely intelligent. And she was like the new modern goth girl. I loved her. I thought she was adorable. And, you know, like the dark hair and wearing all black. And I was like, yes, okay. Yeah, I love your style. She was really cool. And she was just so quiet. But, and I just kind of left her alone because I assumed that it was the adults, but then I realized it was just kind of her. But when she came out and would participate and say things, people stopped and listened because she had a lot to say. It was just that her way was sitting there observing, digesting, and then participating when she felt the most comfortable. So
Yeah.
It is what it is, you know?
Yeah.
People are people.
Well, let's save that then for another time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay. Can we leave it at that and then we'll just jump off
Yeah.
into another podcast soon?
Yeah, sure. Hey, by the way, I realized, I never finished answering your first question.
Oh, okay. Well, what was the first question?
You asked me how I got into materials writing, and I told you.
Let's just go back to the beginning.
And I told you that I started writing on my blog, and then I realized about my presentations, and then we went off, and I never actually told you how I became a materials writer.
This is the best way to end this one. So we'll come back to it. You answer the first question, and then we.
So if anyone's been listening to this the whole time and been waiting for the exciting denouement of that story, it's not that interesting actually. But it does. I think there is something valuable actually in my experience in that when we had our materials writing special interest group pre-conference event at Brastiso conference this year, one of the things that people were asking a lot for people who were teaching and liked creating their materials but hadn't actually been, had never actually done that as a job, like writing materials as a job, was of course, how do I get into it, right? It's the fair, like where do I start and everything. And of course, this is not an easy question to answer because there is no one, one answer to that. But what I was saying to them was that, well, I mean, the first thing they did was that they were there. That was already a really good thing. They're being at an event like that, meeting other people who were in the profession, starting to talk to them, So what happened with me was that I did a presentation a few years ago about fake news and post-truth, and about how we could teach that as sort of connected to, obviously, it's really digital literacy, media literacy, and things like that. And my argument that the English language classroom is a very good place to do that. And so I did a presentation about this, and I did this presentation at the ITFL conference, which I go to almost every year because it's my excuse to go back to the UK, see my family, and then go to the conference. And I love it. And anyone who's listening, watching this, who loves conferences, try and get to the ITFL conference if you can. At some point, it's an amazing thing.
Next year, it's in a really small little town, right?
Yeah, Harrogate. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very nice place, though. Very nice part of the country. And there are and I always tell people there are lots of scholarships, and you'd be surprised how few people apply for them. Okay. Anyway, public service announcement over. So I did that presentation, and it was my first ever solo presentation at ITFL. It was a big deal, and it was in Brighton, my hometown. It was in the same room where I had once seen Radiohead perform live.
No. Okay.
Yeah. I divided the room into, but
yes, but
and
still.
So when I was a teenager, I saw Radiohead in that room playing to not that many people. They were the support group, and so it was all kind of a big deal for me. And the room was packed, and I was like really surprised because I'm not famous or anything. And so the room was packed, and it just went. You're Kelly, you're a presenter. Like when you do a presentation, and it just all falls into place, and it was just all. It's
just wonderful. It's like a really gratifying feeling, right?
It's just everything just went exactly the way you hoped it would be. And I'll
So
probably never do
wonderful.
a better presentation, right? In terms of how I felt, I was like just so pleased.
Good.
Couldn't have been any better. So then I did that presentation again, a couple of month or two later at the Brastiso conference, and there were probably like 15 people in the room, and it was mostly empty. And I was like, well, okay, there you go, right? Coming back to earth after the high of ITFL, and then being like, oh, all right, okay, maybe I'm not as popular as I thought I was.
But that does, okay. Well, I mean, it happened.
Yeah,
it depends on what people are interested in. So
yeah, exactly. No, and it was fine, but obviously after comparing, you can't help.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right? You were like, oh, okay, and I guess people in Brazil are not so keen. But anyway, one of the people who came to that presentation was at FTD. And said they spoke to me and said, we're doing this book, and we're interested in having some lessons about fake news and this subject. Would you like to talk about it? So I said yes, please. And so we met and had a meeting, and I said, well, I want to write the whole series. I don't just want to do these, but I want to do the whole thing. And so they hired me, and they hired Bruno as well, which I didn't know about, but we were already friends before. But they hired us separately, and then we were like, like the Spider-Man meme of him looking at each other like, it's you.
Hey,
and so we worked on that project together, and that project was just amazing. I mean, and it ended up winning the Elton Award and everything. So the whole thing, like that whole project, right from beginning to end, I'll probably never have anything like that again. But the reason I got, the way I got hired for that project was because I put myself out there, right? This is the thing. I did a presentation. She saw and went, oh, that sounds interesting. And then she came to see me. Okay. There were 200 people at the ITEFL conference that came to see me. I got nothing out of that other than the great satisfaction, right? There were 15 people at the Prestige conference, and one of those people hired me to do like this amazing project. So, like those kind of things, you just don't know, but what's going to work and what doesn't. But one thing you do know is if you want to get into it, there's only one guarantee, right? If you don't let people know that you exist, you won't get hired.
That's exactly, yeah, that's a really good message. And people, if you are passionate about something, it doesn't matter what it is. It can be a super niche specific thing or whatever. You have to put yourself out there and just be open to constructive criticism. And sometimes it's just negative criticism and the positive feedback that you get from people. And you just have to put yourself out there because you never know what sticks.
No, but there are different, I don't want people to get the wrong idea, but what I mean by putting yourself out there doesn't necessarily mean like being super public or anything, saying,
no.
Okay, you've got to build up as many Instagram followers as possible.
No. Also, no.
No, I mean, maybe that could work for you. It depends, it's like you might do a post about something and then someone reads that and goes, oh, that's what we're looking, actually, that's what we're looking for, someone who's interested in that area. I'm not discounting anything, really. But it could be that you go to events, you do presentations, you meet people, you connect with them on LinkedIn, you build up your profile. Like I did, I spent years building up a portfolio of my lessons on my blog without ever realizing that that's what I was actually doing, and so you build up that portfolio, and then if people, even if you haven't yet been published, you still have something to show to people. A lot of people do this now on using Instagram to sell lesson plans and share them. Whatever works for you, but you've got to do something, right?
Yes, like putting yourself out there, meaning there has to be some sort of action, and you have to be really passionate about it because you never know when things are going to fall into place. For example, you would assume that after presenting at IATEFL, you might have gotten an offer, but it wasn't until you continued and said, this is really important. I'm going to continue sharing. I've done my due diligence. I've done my research. So let's see if we can share it also here in Brazil. And it wasn't until then that you got the opportunity. So,
well, I mean, from the winning the Elton Award was amazing and really special to me and to all of us on that project. But did I get any work directly from winning that that award? No. I didn't get any direct job offers because it's like, oh look, they won an award for that project, right? Maybe we should hire. It obviously helps with my CV, and that if anyone's interested in looking at me, they'll see that and be like, oh, okay, But in terms of directly leading to work, no, it didn't. And
what did? Was it just continued making connections, networking, professional development? Yeah.
So what can you do, right? Well, you just keep pushing away. And anyone who's a freelancer knows, freelance life is about just keep on chipping away, looking for new opportunities, trying to generate new opportunities. If you've got a quiet period, then you're like, okay, then maybe I can just do something of my own here, my own project. Maybe there's a book that I want to write that I could just self-publish, or maybe there's a project that I want to work on. Or you might want to say, I've worked a lot this year. I'm going to take a couple of months off. Good for me. Yeah.
Oh, See, yeah, that would be nice too.
Yeah, well, I'm sure.
But
Sure.
you can't take too long of a time. It's
No,
the thing
no,
about
no,
freelancing.
if you can afford it, right? Then, yeah.
Obviously, you
Yeah.
have to be pretty well organized and regulated on that, because you never know what the next opportunity comes. So,
Yeah, and
freelance
they tend
materials
to be,
writing is.
yeah, they tend to be fairly short projects as well most of the time. So,
Mhm.
you know, the good thing is that, you know, the pay is reasonable. So, you know, you don't have to, you know, sort of work 40 hours a week, or if you do work 40 hours a week for a period, you can afford probably to take a bit of time off after, which you'll probably need if you're doing that kind of amount of work, because it is quite demanding. I find it quite demanding. I can't spend 8 hours a day writing lessons, because after a few hours, my brain is like, you know,
Oh yeah, no, that's
swimming
very
in multiple choice questions. So, yeah.
multiple choice question soup your brain turns
Yeah.
to.
So to answer your question, that
Mm.
was how I got my start. Yeah, there you go.
That's wonderful. Oh, yeah, actually, that's a wonderful way to just kind of wrap everything up, because we've been talking for a while, and I loved it. Oh God, we went everywhere. But I do.
As I thought we would.
It's fine though. It's, you know, I thought it was very informative. But I do need you and Thais to come back, because I do want to talk. I want to dig into that introverted talk. I think that's a really, really good topic, and especially nowadays, dealing with people online and being introverted. So I'm gonna get you again.
Yeah, no.
if you'll come.
Yeah, no, and I know Thais Olivelli, to give her full credit, she's very passionate about this subject as well, so she'd be very happy to.
Well, I'm excited. So I want to thank you for spending a bit of your afternoon with me, and you're, again, welcome back anytime. But first, you're coming back with Thais, and and any last words of advice for anybody looking into materials, or words of wisdoms from James Taylor?
Oh, no pressure. I mean, I think they've heard probably more than enough. But I think no, I think I've
You've
said
got
enough.
it.
I don't think I need to lay anything more on people for now. And knowing us, we'd probably open up another tangent, and then that'd be another 25 minutes. So it's probably best we stop.
We probably should stop. We're a little chatty, aren't we? No, but again, thank you so much for being here, and until next time, I guess we'll see each other soon.
Yeah, my pleasure, and yeah, see you next week.
We'll just make it a weekly thing. Perfect.
Ready to join the conversation? Wonderful. Head on over to Instagram at Real Talk and ELT Pod, or at Kelly Pennington ELT, and send me a message. That's it for me. Take care of yourself, your health, your vibe, and your tribe. Until next time.
Sorry.
It's okay. I was in full flow. And hold on, she hasn't moved. And I just finished. I nicely finished the sentence, because I was like, just in case. And then I just went like, because I'm a pro, right? You know, I know how podcasting and stuff works. I didn't just interrupt the sentence. I just finished the sentence and held it silence. Okay.
Beautiful. No, and I'm just gonna, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna edit this right in and be sorry, I lost power. I'm back.
Okay, I wish you told me that before I started talking then, but okay.
It's fine. See how much, you're just, you know what happens, technical issues, you know. But yeah. But sorry, I wanted to hear the rest of that. So to unpack all of the information in the Financial Times article.
Oh yeah, the Economist article. That was
yeah.
it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So I was saying that